So yes, this morning we're talking about slavery. And as Jane had said that many times they have to choose this life because it's the only way to make a living for their families, which is a horrendous condition. Oddly enough, it's probably a condition that was around during the time of the Bible for many women, because women weren't considered much more than something men owned. And but trafficking happens all across our nation to both boys and girls. But this morning I'm going to talk to you about hope after slavery. And many of us, I know that you've heard me say that all of us are enslaved to sin before we come to God. And it's that enslavement to sin that makes all this trafficking profitable. Because if the world weren't enslaved in sin, it wouldn't be committing these atrocities. But there was a young man named Joseph. And I would say that his only true fault was that he was extraordinarily naive, and he kind of had a big mouth. And his dad showed a tremendous amount of love towards him and fairly well neglected the rest of his kids. And I know I've asked before, but I'm sure there are some of you out here that are pretty sure that your parents liked your sibling more than they did you. And but in this case, it was very apparent. And it all stemmed from the fact that actually all of the children were from 4 separate mothers, 2 wives and 2 concubines, and so they all had, between them, they had at this time 11 children, and but Joseph's father, had loved Joseph's mother. That's the one he truly wanted. He was in love with this one. So when she finally had a child, she had been barren for years. When she finally had a child, it was Daddy's little boy. And I know many of you have. Does anybody ever went? Brad, did you guys go see Joseph in the Technicolor Code?
I've seen it on TV.
I wanted to go see that. But he wore this coat. Dad gave him this coat. He didn't give it to any of the other kids, right? And so his coat, and the significance of it was, for one thing, it was long. And you only got the long coat if you were royalty or in charge. And it was also of many colors. And that too was a sign of royalty, because see, that was expensive. You know, we don't think about it much today because some of us can get really bright clothing for pretty cheap. Right? You know, it doesn't cost a lot to go out and find a lime green shirt. But back then, to find something that was brightly colored, that was expensive. It had to be dyed. And that dye was very expensive. It was also, by the way, very stinky when they were making it, which was one of the reasons it was expensive. It was a hard process. And so he gave him this multicolored long coat. And his brothers despised him. Absolutely hated him. And again, he was naive, so Daddy would send him out to go check on the brothers. And he would come back with a bad report. Oh man, they were out there drinking and smoking and chewing and running with those who were doing. all sorts of stuff. He would come back with whatever he found was wrong. He would tell Daddy, oh yeah, they're blowing it, man. Well, obviously that did not further help his cause. And so the brothers planned to kill him. Remember, they're all half-brothers. And so they planned to kill him. But the oldest brother, Reuben, said, don't kill him. Listen, instead, throw him into the cistern. We don't want that blood on our hands. And so he had planned to come back. And so that's what we're picking up in this verse in Genesis chapter 37. It says, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this as he intended to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, that ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. And as they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. And they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. So his brothers agreed with him. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. So Joseph was sold into slavery through really no fault of his own. That happened a lot, I'm sure. And it happens today. But amazingly, God can redeem each and every one. God has made plans of redemption for all of us. And in Joseph's case, I've told you lots of times, bad things can happen to us. But God finds a way to bring something good out of that. And you would think, what good is being sold into slavery? And so, here's Joseph. He's taken to Egypt, and he's put in this prison slave pen thing. And he was sharp as a tack. I'm sure that Daddy, all this time that he's Daddy's favorite kid, he was at home learning the business. Right? While his brothers were out there just being sheep herders, he was learning how to run a business. Isn't that something? How God takes something that we would never think about and gives us skills, teaches us skills that we didn't think we'd ever use. I never thought I was going to be a pastor. But Dad, all the time, I went with my dad, I did things, I learned the skills. And Joseph was right by his daddy's side, learning these skills. And so when he gets to Egypt, and he's a slave, they put him in charge of the rest of the prisoners. So he makes sure the food is there, and, everything is done correctly. And this guy comes by. His title is Potiphar, and he comes by and he wants a slave, and the guy tells him this guy is really sharp, and everything he does, it seems to flourish. We don't really get it, but everything he touches seems to just flourish. And so Potiphar takes him, buys him whatever it takes, and takes him to his house and puts him in charge of the entire house. And of course, as those of us that know the story, Potiphar's wife never said no for an answer, and everything that she saw was hers. And so she tried to take Joseph. He refused. He remained godly, chose his morals over the easy way out, and she told hubby that he had attacked her. So hubby threw him in prison. So once again, now he's in prison, as far as he knows, for the rest of his life, for something not only did he not do, but for standing up and resisting it. And he's in prison. How many of you think that you might be just a tad depressed? Huh? Would that be the life you'd think, oh, this is what I expected when I was growing up and had that nice robe, was comfy in Dad's tent? This is cool. Yeah, I expected to be put in prison. But Joseph continues his godly attitude. Isn't that amazing? I just think next week I'm going to be talking about stuff that really bugs me. In fact, let me take this opportunity. All of you should have my email address, Pastor John at Corona Nast. I want you to send me things that really bug you. None of them should include anything about me. I just want to know what really bugs you, because I can incorporate that into next week's sermon. But, man, But here's Joseph, still with a great attitude. Man, anybody know somebody like that that just irritates them? Oh, can you believe this person? They're always happy. Right? But he's got this attitude, and then God did something else. He gave him the ability to interpret dreams. That's timely. God is timely. Maybe not what we would consider. I'm sure that Joseph didn't think that God was really rushing into helping. But here's God, gives him the ability to interpret dreams. He interprets a couple of guys' dreams and tells them, listen, when you get out of here, one of you's going to die. He told them that, and the other one's going to get out. And when you return to your job, please let Pharaoh know about me. Well, the guy gets his job back, and of course, he's like me, he forgets. I'm having surgery tomorrow, and Tony and I pre-bowled for tomorrow because I won't be able to be there. And I said, if you hadn't said something, it would have completely not crossed my mind that I actually couldn't be here while I'm in the hospital. The man. And so it slips our minds, and finally, Pharaoh has this dream, and it's really bugging him. And God keeps bugging him about it. See, people don't realize God can bug non-Christians too. Did you know that? God can bug everybody when he wants to. And God bugs Pharaoh until Pharaoh, somebody interpret these dreams. And finally the guy remembers, the wine guy remembers and says, there's this guy that's in prison. And he knows how to interpret dreams. So Pharaoh has him washed and cleaned, because you don't come into Pharaoh's presence without taking a bath. And he has him washed and cleaned, and he comes in, and he interprets this dream for Pharaoh. He said there's going to be 7 years of the most abundant food and everything that you can imagine. Everything's going to grow. It's going to be great, and everybody's going to think how great it is. But after that, there's going to be 7 years of horrendous famine that will be so bad that no one will even remember the good years. And Pharaoh says, so what should we do? And he said, you need to get somebody. I love how he did this. You need to find somebody who's really smart and can prepare for this happening. And Pharaoh says, well, thank you. Step up. If any of you have any ideas about, when people come to me and say, listen, I think we ought to, I said, hey, great, when are you going to start? And that's what Pharaoh did. He said, come on up. All right. And Pharaoh put him in charge of the whole land. He was second in charge under Pharaoh. It's amazing. I go from being the favorite son to slavery to prison to slavery to prison, and then basically to be governor over the most powerful kingdom at the time. That's amazing. And he stores up all this stuff. And here's the amazing thing. See, he's storing up all this food. And God, I think God has a tremendous sense of humor, don't you? I think he's got something close to Dennis in my humor. I'm pretty sure. Because God is hilarious about the way he brings us about. See, Jacob and them, they're going to have a problem having food. And so they come, all the brothers come, and Joseph's going around. They don't recognize me. Oh, this is great. He saves the entire Jewish race because of where he has been put. He wouldn't have been put there if he hadn't been sold into slavery. Huh? That doesn't mean slavery is a good thing. It means that God, with his sense of humor, not only found a way to make something good out of it, to elevate Joseph, not just to help Joseph. Sometimes we think that when the Bible says all things work together for good, that means God's going to give us money. That's not what it means. Maybe we won't get the money, but maybe somebody else. Or maybe we won't get the skills, but we will bring somebody else in. And God not only found a way to elevate Joseph and give him a sense of purpose and self-esteem, just like these young ladies are doing for the people in Thailand, not only found a way to heal him. And you know he's healed because what does he do? He plays tricks on his brothers. He too has a pretty good sense of humor. But he forgives. Listen, you cannot forgive if you haven't been healed. And it's one of those paradoxes. You also can't be forgiving. You can't be healed unless you're willing to forgive. Isn't that fine? You can't be forgiving unless you've been healed, but you also can't be healed unless you're willing to forgive. And Joseph forgave his brothers. So he had been healed. And he told the brothers, listen, let it go. Let it go because, see, God made something wonderful out of what you meant for bad. Isn't that great? Did you know that's the story of redemption? That's the story of Jesus Christ taking some of us. There's a lot of songs out there where you're turning, there's one song, you probably know it, turning diamonds out of dust, making diamonds out of us. God's redemptive power takes something that's not very good looking, something that's made a lot of mistakes, something that's been hard on people around, and can turn it into something beautiful. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you. See, there's no place that you've been that hope isn't waiting. There's no place that you've been that God has not already been there. There's nothing that you've done that God cannot restore. God is a redeeming God. God is a healing God. And most of all, God is our hope. Let's pray.